I've worked in horse racing for over 30 years, but sadly, I've only met 5 individuals of BAME ethnicity that work in senior positions within the sport. Today, we're going to meet the lady who has got one of the most high-pressured jobs in horse racing, making sure our biggest steeplechase, the Grand National, takes place here at Aintree successfully every year. This is Sulekha Varma's story. Sulekha, thank you for sharing your story with us. Tell us how this wonderful name Varma ended up in Scotland, of all places.
My father's Indian. My mum is white English. She is actually not far, originally family not far from here near Wigan. But my dad qualified as a doctor in India and decided to continue his career in the UK, and Liverpool was the first place he landed, the first place he had a job. At the time, my mum was a nurse in Liverpool, and the two of them met at a dinner and were married within a very short time. And then in 1985 I came along.
Fantastic. And was that up in Scotland or were you born elsewhere?
No, I was actually amazingly born in Cardiff. Dad got a job as a consultant neurosurgeon in Dundee. So we moved, whole family moved up to Scotland, and we stayed there for 14 years.
Fantastic, beautiful part of the world. But probably not the most diverse part of the world. And I was brought up in a little village in Leicestershire, and exactly the same. We were the only non-whites in the village. Were you the same up in Scotland?
Yes, I think we probably were in the village we lived in. Yeah, I was probably, in fact, the only non-white in my school for much of my childhood. But it just never, I think when you're that young, it doesn't really register.
No, agreed, and I felt exactly the same, that, you know, until I got to sort of probably 11 and 12 and teenage years is probably when you start to realise that maybe you're a little bit different. Although I recall back at a school day, first day, age 6 or 7 at junior school, and the headmaster bringing me out in front of the whole school and said, "Now this is Josh, he's just arrived and he's special."
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one because you often get that question of where are you from? Quite honestly, I just say to them, "Do you mean why is my skin brown?" And people go, "Well, yeah, kind of." And then you explain, I'm half Indian, my dad's Indian, my mum's English, and people go, "Oh, okay, yeah, we get that."
Now tell me, all about horse racing. We're here at Aintree today. When did you first see a horse, sit on a horse? Where did the bug come from?
An element of pester power. I had my own pony. I was very lucky. And I rode regularly till I was about 16, and then made the decision to focus on school and education. I was doing well at school, so the plan was that I would go to university, and so my efforts were focused in that direction instead, but I just couldn't get rid of the horse bug. And then it was while I was at university that I discovered the BHA graduate programme.
How did you find out about it? Because there'd be people watching this programme and they were saying, "Well, God, that sounds amazing." How did you find out about the BHA graduate course?
I think I must have found it online. I don't really remember. I'd sort of got into racing when I was 18. The graduate programme is a 2-week course in a normal year based at the racing school in Newmarket. It was actually a virtual online course this year. And then, again, in a normal year, that's followed by a sponsored placement. So when you go for the interview, you state which placements you like the sound of and which ones you'd like to go for. And I put the Racing Post as the top of mine, still with that thought that journalism might be the route I wanted to go down. So I spent 6 weeks working mainly on the news desk at the Racing Post, which was just an incredible experience.
Sulekha began her career in earnest as secretary at the yard of Lucinda Russell. From there, she has quickly built up an impressive CV. She commenced her career as clerk of the course as a trainee with Jockey Club racecourses at Haydock Park, and then went on to serve as clerk at 4 other Jockey Club tracks: Nottingham, Market Raisin, Warwick and Huntingdon. Then, in 2016, the big break came. She became the first woman to be named clerk of the course at Aintree Racecourse. Sulekha had been put in charge of the world's most famous race, the Grand National.
I was about to get on a plane to fly to Gran Canaria, and was just about to turn my phone off, and a text message came through saying, "Have you heard the news? Andrew Tulloch's leaving." And I thought, "Oh, right, okay." So we were away for 2 weeks, which actually was quite nice because it gave me time just to think it through. You know, this job has only come up once every 25 years. You know, so if I miss it this time, that's...
You're going to be an old lady by the time it comes around again.
Exactly, I'll be ready for retirement.
So how big a deal was it when you then get the call, and I'm sure it wasn't a text message this time, to say you'd got the role of Clerk of the course at one of the most iconic sporting venues in the world, really.
It was amazing. The first thing I did was rang my mum and dad, who were screaming and jumping about. And then it was a case of making plans and getting ready to move house and put my house on the market and all these sort of things.
And tell us about the role now. So, I mean, what does it encompass? Tell us more about actually your work in the community.
Racecourses as a whole, or racing as a whole, has become aware in the last maybe 5 years, maybe longer in fact, that we have to become part of our communities. We have to give something back. Particularly, there's an inner city riding school in Liverpool called Park Palace Ponies. I think they've got 5 or 6 ponies, and children from local schools go for a 10-week session, once a week for 10 weeks, to learn how to ride, to experience horses, to understand, get an affinity with horses, because these children in Liverpool probably otherwise wouldn't see a horse.
How do you see us getting more interaction and more people coming racing as participants, or the crowd and the fans of racing from a BAME background?
We almost need to shake off this image that we're stuffy and white only. Do
you think being called the sport of kings is a negative then?
I think it probably is these days, yeah. I think being called the sport of kings implies that you have to have a lot of money, you have to be wealthy, you have to dress a certain way, you have to speak a certain way.
It's not an inclusive phrase.
Yeah.
There's a new initiative that I know that both of us are involved in, but tell us more about Step on Track.
So Step on Track is directly targeting 16 to 19-year-olds from BAME backgrounds and giving them a flavour of the career opportunities in racing. And I think that is the message that we want to get out with this course, is that just because it's horse racing doesn't exclude you from taking part and from having a career in the sport. And I think it comes down to people like you and I showing people, look what we're doing. My career's gone in different directions along the way, and look where I've got to now. And proving that it can be done, and the sport is available to everybody.
Do you think being of BAME ethnicity has been a help or a hindrance throughout your career? For me, it's what's driven me. It's made me to try and prove to everybody else. I didn't do GCSEs, I didn't do A levels and what have you. But I went out to try and prove to people that I was as good as the next person. That's what drove me in terms of being a BAME individual within what I perceived as a white person's sport, because we don't bump into too many people that look like us.
I remember years ago you and I were in the pub in Lambourne and one of our other friends was sat next to me who's also of BAME origin, and you walked in and said, I'm going to go and sit in the black corner. Because we were literally the only 3 people in Lambourne really who would socialise there, and I think I always remember you saying that, because I think up to that point it had never really dawned on me actually how few BAME people there are in our sport, and it's not to say there aren't any at all. We've talked before about stable staff, that they are actually, when it comes to ethnicity, a diverse workforce, but where we're not seeing it is at the top of the sport. I think it's thinking about how are we recruiting, how widely are we casting the net? When you have a vacancy to fill, where do you go first? Well, you put it on the Careers in Racing website, you put it in the Racing Post. Well, there's only certain people who are going to see those.
So talking about getting more people of BAME ethnicity coming to our race courses and experiencing what a great day, not just here at Aintree, but across the board, we've got some great diverse race courses. So how do we get a more diverse audience coming?
I think we need to think about the image that we show of racing to the outside world, and I think that that drills down to things as simple as the marketing images we're using to sell our race days and to sell our tickets. Are we showing people a diverse audience, or do they look at it and think, that's a group of white people, that's not for me? We need to get the message out that our sport is open to everybody.
And we have got quite a lot of inner city race courses. So if you look at the likes of Leicester, is a prime example of where there is a huge Asian and Indian community. Now, is it because there is inner city and there's rural areas, and generally you find BAME communities in the inner city? Do you think there's a rural city divide there?
I think there probably is, because we've both said that you and I were brought up in rural areas, which has probably meant that we had the chance to be exposed to horses and in turn racing. The diversity steering group are communicating with Leicester Racecourse at the moment to see if there's any way we can help them get into their community even more, because they host dozens of Indian weddings every year, but those people then don't come racing. They're coming to the racecourse, but they're somewhere the connection between the venue and the sport is missing. It comes back to what we said before about making sure people are aware that the sport, your only route into the sport isn't being a jockey. There's so many other ways to be involved in the sport. Even buying into a syndicate or a racing club, or starting a career on any side of the business. The sport isn't just about riding the horses.
And as we look towards the future, you're going to have your first Grand National hopefully coming up next year, and tell us what else are you looking forward to over the coming years.
Long term, I really hope we can have some people in to watch next year's Grand National. Racing behind closed doors is functional, but it's a soulless experience.
And I think you're a great mentor to a lot of people within this sport. So thank you very much for having us at Aintree today.
Very welcome.